I think it's time for a pumpkin recipe. Welcome to How to Make Dinner. I'm Paula, and today I'm making a batch of my current favorite pumpkin muffins. They're so simple and so tender. They seem to last forever on the counter. I don't even know how that's possible, but they almost get better the next day. And you can freeze them, you can pack them in lunches. They're just a total hit. Right after Thanksgiving, canned pumpkin seems to always go on sale, so you can stock up and buy a bunch of cans and make this whenever you want. To make these muffins, I have one bowl. I'm gonna start off with the pumpkin puree. So I have a kind of a weird amount, 398 grams of pumpkin puree. The reason for the weird amount is that's exactly how much comes in one of these small cans. And I didn't want to make you, deal with a tiny bit of a leftover can or open a can and then use like a tiny bit of it. So it's exactly one small can of canned pumpkin, not pumpkin pie filling, just pure pumpkin. So that's going in first. Next is a 1/4 cup of oil, just vegetable oil. Not much. These are actually like kind of on the healthy side, which is very nice. It means that you can feel pretty good about having them for breakfast. I'm gonna use a 1/4 cup of milk, and I have soy milk, 2 eggs, and about a teaspoon of vanilla, or just, some. So I'm gonna mix that together really well. I find that I barely ever bust out my electric baking units anymore, like my KitchenAid or even my cake mixer, hand mixer. I just feel like, I don't know, I guess it just doesn't suit my mood. I kind of love the quiet of doing things by hand, and this just doesn't really need to be mixed vigorously at any point, so I just do it by hand. Almost forgot the brown sugar. That goes into the wet ingredients as well. And that was 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Usually with muffins, you have 2 separate bowls. You have a wet mix and a dry mix. You mix them both separately and then mix them together. But I prefer just using a sieve because sifting ingredients is always nice. It means that you get any like random bits of stuff that shouldn't be in your flour out of there. And it just kind of helps to pre-mix the dry ingredients. So I just sieve things right in. First dry ingredient though is whole wheat flour, and that doesn't really go through a sieve because it has bran in it, and the bran ends up just getting stuck in the sieve. So I just throw that in straight up. But everything else will go through the sieve. So I have a cup of whole wheat flour there. I have a cup of white flour, all purpose. I have a teaspoon each of baking soda and baking powder. I have a teaspoon of cinnamon. And about 1/2 teaspoon of cardamom, which I happen to love. And then a full teaspoon of salt, which seems like a lot, but it works. And so those just get sifted in. So now instead of having to wash a whole separate bowl, I just use one bowl. And then this, because it's just dry stuff, doesn't need to be washed at all. I just tap it really well and I just throw it right back in my drawer. I'm gonna have all the weights and the cup measurements for this recipe. You'll find it in the description. I almost always use weights when I'm baking. I find it easier too because that way when you're sifting everything in, you don't even have to measure it with cups. You can just measure as you go right on the scale. That's that. So I'm just gonna mix everything together. Now here's the part where you get to be a little bit creative. I'm making pumpkin cranberry muffins today, but at this point, these muffins can go in whichever direction you want. You can use, blueberries, or you can use raisins, dates would be really good. You don't have to add anything else. You can just have a straight up pumpkin. You could add walnuts. You could even ditch the cinnamon and cardamom and go savory and add like sharp cheddar cheese and walnuts or something like that. I've done that with this recipe and it's really good because they're not super sweet. So it can really easily go in the savory direction. So I'm just gonna mix this together till it's just combined. You don't really wanna mix it really well because it'll get tough. And then I'm gonna add, this is the optional extras part. I'm gonna add 50 grams of pumpkin seeds. And frozen cranberries. I'm just so obsessed with cranberries in any baked goods. I love the burst. So I used to work in a lot of coffee shops in my past, and I would come up with several muffin recipes for these coffee shops. And I'm really fussy about muffins. I actually think most muffins are bad. Most muffins are really crappy. So I refuse to come up with any crappy muffin recipes. And two of the places I worked at, I developed a pumpkin muffin recipe, and at both places I left eventually and didn't take the recipe with me. I know one of them is still using those pumpkin muffins because I saw them there recently. But so then I just have to come up with a new pumpkin muffin recipe. It seems to be my thing. So this is, I think, the third or the fourth pumpkin muffin recipe that I've come up with, but I think it might be my favorite. So that's it, that's the batter. I'm just gonna grab my greased muffin tray. You can use muffin cups if you want. I think muffin cups are definitely a personal preference kind of thing. I don't tend to use them just because I don't see any real reason to. And if you have a nonstick muffin tin, you don't need to really do anything. Just scoop the batter right in. This one is not nonstick, so I just rubbed it with some oil. And I like to use a portion scoop for muffins because it comes out really easily. So if you have one, it'll be great to use it. And then just scoop them in. I like to make my muffins I like them to be pretty round and kind of poking out of the muffin tin. So I fill them quite full. And this batch with this size of muffin makes a dozen. Pretty perfect. Spot on. The reason I'm using a combination of whole wheat flour and white flour is because the white flour really gives the muffins some good kind of sturdy body and it's kind of like light, whereas the whole wheat flour is quite heavy. I have made these with 100% whole wheat flour before, and they were a little bit dense. So I switched to the half and half. And at this point, I'm gonna see that maybe some of them were a little overstuffed. Maybe I was a little bit too generous with the cranberries in some. So I'll just kind of do a bit of tinkering until things look evened out. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then I'm gonna throw these into a 350-degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. Sometimes I sprinkle a few extra pumpkin seeds on top, but I'm out, so I'm not gonna do that. When these muffins come out, they're so fluffy. I try and give them a good 10 minutes or so before I try and take them out of the muffin cups so they don't fall apart. And then I just transfer them to a wire rack to cool completely. Breaking into one of these muffins is so satisfying because you get tons of cranberries. The muffin itself is so tender. They're not too sweet. They've got a little bit of spice. They're really cozy and comforting with the pumpkin. And I'm just such a big fan of these. So when they're cooled down completely, I like to store them in a covered dish or a covered container of some kind. And honestly, they seem to get better the next day and even 2 days afterwards. They're just so moist and the dough is so nice and tender. Let me know if you like these kind of easy baking videos because I don't bake very often on this show and I want to know if you'd like to see more. Thanks so much for making muffins with me today. I hope you go and make these for yourself and I hope you love them. Be sure to like, dislike, subscribe, and share with a friend. And I look forward to seeing you next week.